Welcome back. You guys love the complete mechanics guide that I posted a month ago. That video is the first lesson that I teach inside my 6-week coaching program, and this next video that you're about to watch goes in depth with the topic of game sense. Game sense is important because no matter how good your aim is, if you're at a gun disadvantage, there's a good chance you'll lose a gunfight. And no matter how good your aim is, there's no point if you're constantly getting shot from the back or the side. Game sense is a combination of game knowledge, pattern recognition, and decision-making skills. So in this video, I'll break down every component of game sense to help you become aware of what patterns you need to recognize in order for you to make the best decisions in game. Once again, the quick disclaimer is that this video is long. This is an educational video from our premium coaching program that students paid money to learn from. And these lessons have helped countless students hit Immortal and Radiant. I'm giving out these lessons to help those of you guys who can't afford to pay for coaching. We even have free weekly lessons inside my Discord server that you can check out. So my only ask is that you watch this whole video and share it with your friends. Lastly, for those of you guys who can afford coaching, we have a 5-division rank up in 6 weeks guarantee. We sold out all 30 spots inside of our coaching program in just 2 weeks. So I had to bring on more coaches to add 10 more spots. By the time this video goes up, those spots are probably gone as well. But the good news is we'll open up 50 new spots for the next season of the Immortal Roadmap program. So click the link in the description below to book a free call with me or one of my coaches to see if you'd be a good fit for our program. Alrighty guys, this is lesson 2 of the Immortal Roadmap program. And so last week, the goal was for us to learn everything there is to the mechanics in Valorant and give you guys some tools to be able to practice it. With this lesson, the goal by the end of the lesson, you should be able to understand the concept of what map control is and start to get a general idea of what are the most effective ways for me to be able to get map control with my team. I'll be breaking it down with different ways to position yourselves and a bit of util usage, but util usage and all that will come more in the next lesson where we talk about teamwork and communication as well. Let's get started. Game sense. Why is it important? Having good game sense lets us recognize in-game patterns and make the best possible play in the given game scenario. There are 5 patterns that I've been able to categorize in this game. So number 1 is mechanical patterns. That's understanding angle advantages, how enemies tend to peek or hold different angles. Is it like a common angle where people opt from? Like those are all patterns that you need to start recognizing as you're playing the game. Second, economy patterns. So just understanding when to buy or to save depending on your ultimate econ and also your credit econ, whatever you have on your team. Also, what patterns to expect based on how much credits that the enemy team has as well. What you can expect for them to buy, what you can expect them to play around with the types of guns that they're able to buy. The third pattern is positioning patterns. So teammate and enemy positioning patterns. So you can position yourself accordingly based on your teammates and also based on how the enemy team is also reacting. So that's like rotation patterns for your teammates and the enemy team. And then there are utility patterns and mindset patterns, which we'll go into more in the next lesson. Developing game sense, it's like just being aware of what patterns exist in the game first, and then knowing how you can start to develop that, putting that into practice, and then getting to a point where automatically you can make a lot of decisions based on the game sense that you're building. So game sense really is just a combination of game knowledge and decision-making skills. So once you build up enough game knowledge, it'll become easier to make better and smarter decisions in game. And as you get more used to it, it'll start to become automatic. So with mechanical patterns, it's just asking yourself, like, what kind of angle is this? How should I peek or hold this type of angle? And actually, I have like this whole video on YouTube that you guys can just look through if you want just like a quick rundown of this again. What are the different types of peaks again? When should you use it? And how should you hold different angles as well? So let's go into economy. Why is this important? Understanding econ helps us plan ahead, snowball the lead, and there are some important numbers that you need to understand as well. So first off, with econ, it lets us know what your team and the enemies can buy, and based off that, it gives us an indication of how enemies might try to play out the round. So weak buy or eco is like when you guys don't have enough money to buy any rifles on your team. So you guys might have like SMGs, marshals, pistols, things like that. With a half buy, it's generally when only like 2 or 3 of your teammates can actually buy rifles, and even then they might have to buy like light armor. And a full buy is when your whole team is able to buy rifles and have full armor, utility, things like that. Compared to Counter-Strike with Valorant, it's very, very easy to snowball the lead because you only need 13 rounds to win the game. it's worth it to force buy in certain situations where you know you can completely shut down the enemy econ. And to understand that, we need to go over the important numbers. So if you lose a round, it's 1900 credits, and every consecutive round you lose in a row after that, you get another 500. So total, you cap out at 2900 credits. And if you manage to win a round, then you get 3000 credits. But let's say you lose again right after that, you're back down to 1900 credits. Every kill on top of that will get 200 credits. And for attackers, if you plant the bomb, it's 300 credits for every single person on the team. With the current econ meta, if you win the pistol round, for duelists, generally I like to buy like a ghost or sheriff, util, if like it's close range maps, or if I know I'm going to take close range fights. The frenzy got nerfed, so I wouldn't really touch it for now. And long range fights, if I'm going to go to like belong on pearl or something like that, I'll probably buy sheriff, because it's only 2 body shots if they're also using a ghost or sheriff. For support characters, like anyone like initiators and controllers, you should definitely prioritize utility to help your teammates get onto the site or to defend a site from being just run over. So generally I like to buy light armor and util, or you can buy some util and a ghost. If you win the pistol round, generally you want to buy a specter and full shield. The reason why you don't buy light armor second round is because if you get right clicked with a classic in the face, a single headshot and 2 body shots does 130 damage. So that will instantly kill you even if you have light armor. And with duelists, sometimes you can buy just your sheriff again, or just keep the sheriff from the previous round if you won, and then use that to op third round, like for instance on Jet. There are alternatives to this as well. If Breeze and Icebox comes back into the rotation, I highly recommend buying something like a Bulldog instead of a Spectre, even if it means buying a little less utility, because again, in the mechanics class, I showed you guys how strong the Bulldog can be. And if you use that into the bonus round, which is the third round, you can have a pretty good chance of fighting against even Vandals and Phantoms, okay? If you're playing Jet or Reyna or some other character, like a duelist, sometimes Marshall is pretty good second round as well if you're going to hold a site that's further range, because I showed you guys too where you can just crouch peek and hip fire with the Marshall and you'll still be able to one-shot people pretty easily in the body. So that's pretty viable as well. But the third round is a bonus round for these guys if they win the second round. The reason why this exists is because if you win the first round and the second round together, you get 3000 credits in total. So let's say that we spent all our credits pistol round to buy a pistol utility. So we won. So we get 3000 credits at least, maybe even more if we were attacking and if we got some kills too. So with 3000 credits, that's enough to buy Spectre, full shield, and some utility. So you spent all that credits you just earned. You really need to win every single round. That's the focus, because it's only 13 rounds. So every single round counts. Please buy. And because you guys had better guns, it's very likely that you guys are also going to win the second round pretty easily, unless the other team buys, but you should still be able to win because of the econ advantage. You guys are very favored. So that means you get another 3000 credits, right? And let's say that on the third round, you guys are able to kill a few enemies, but still lose a round. What that means is you get 3000, maybe 2000 because you might have bought an armor again, but 3000 plus another 1900, that's 4900. That's plenty enough for you to be able to buy rifle, shield, and full armor, while the other team, they had to use all their credits because they lost the first round, second round, so that's 4300 credits, but they probably are going to buy utility along the way. So some of them are not even going to be able to have full armor and rifle. So if you die, they won the third round, but because they died, they're only going to have 3000 credits left because they spent all of the 4300 from round 1 and 2 to buy full shield and rifle. And because they died on the third round, even though they won 3000 credits, that's not enough for you to be able to buy rifle and full shield. Then here's the fun part. Your team should have an econ advantage going into the fourth round. You guys should be able to buy rifles, full shield, a lot of utility, but the other team, they'll be on like a half buy or like a really weak full buy. And therefore, if you guys manage to win the fourth round, then what happens is they're back, their losing streak credit got reset to just gain 1900 credits only. So you guys got another 3000, plus you get to keep some rifles, and on top of that, the enemy team's completely broke again. So going to the fifth round, you guys will have like 4 to 5k in your bank, and the other team will be completely broke. What happens if you lose a piss round though? You could potentially force second round with the Spectre light shield or full armor plus sheriff if you plant the bomb on the first round as the attackers. And I'd only recommend doing this if you guys are losing 310 or 211, like you guys really need to get something on the board. Or you can try to do it if you guys want to all buy even like stingers and full armor, or stinger and light armor, especially when you're playing on really close range maps like Fracture or Split. That could sometimes work, but you need to be a little coordinated for that. So generally in rank, I just tend to just save if I lose a piss round. The goal on the second round, just kill as many enemies as possible to lessen their lead so that their bonus can't be as strong. Because if you guys manage to kill 3 or even 4 while you guys were saving, then they can't really have a strong bonus. So you guys can actually keep a lot of your guns on the third round and move on to the fourth round. So you guys are pretty chill. I recommend over sheriffs, buying shorty, shotguns, or even marshals in bigger maps over the sheriff, especially if you don't have really good mechanics, because sheriffs are definitely way harder to use and you can still get a lot of value out of playing these other lesser used guns if you just use them properly. They're just much easier to get kills with for people below Diamond, Ascendant, from what I've seen. Okay, like don't try to go for headshots like if you don't have the mechanics to do so. Okay, but sheriffs definitely can be really strong in the higher ranks if your mechanics can keep up. So here, half buy versus full buys. So during a save, pay attention to the minimum credits next round and try to have at least 4,300 to 4,500 credits available for a full buy. That's the general amount. When you press buy, you'll be able to see minimum credits next round. So based on that, just try to calculate in the next round, okay, like I can still buy sheriff, or I can still buy light shield and rifle, and I should still be able to full buy with the rest of my team. And if 3 of your teammates can full buy, generally I'd say it's worth it for the other 2 teammates to also force up with the rifle or light shield, or guardian full armor, maybe even bulldog too. However, don't do this if you're support. Prioritize util. So if you have 3,300 and let's say the rest of your teammates, all like 3 of your teammates are buying full rifle and shield, just buy a Spectre and full shield, but make sure you prioritize util. And then when it comes to saving, I just have like a short little clip. Last but not least, I want to go over when you should either save your gun or die before the round ends. If you survive in a round that you lost, you'll still get to keep all your weapons and armor, but the game will count it as a save and you'll only get 1,000 credits. Despite this penalty, there are a couple of scenarios when saving your weapon is a good idea. Number 1, saving can allow your whole team to still have a full buy even after losing a round. Number 2, saving can sometimes take away guns that you don't want to deal with from your enemies. And number 3, saving can also incite the enemy team to chase after you, leading to some exit kills and free econ damage. From my personal experience, you only want to save guns that are worth 2,900 credits or more, and if I'm going to save a guardian or bulldog, I'd rather try to do some econ damage to the enemies. If you have guns that are not worth saving, you should try to find a way to die before the round ends. For example, let's say you're playing on the defender side. You only have a classic while the enemies have rifles. Time is already running out for you to defuse the bomb, and it doesn't look like you'll be able to do any econ damage to the enemy team. The worst possible scenario would be saving your classic and only getting 1,000 credits. That's why if you know you already secured the round but the enemy has a weak gun, you should try to keep them alive instead of killing them. Another scenario you want to avoid is giving an easy kill to the enemy team, which gives them extra credits and ult points. An ideal scenario here would be to die to the spike explosion so you still get the lost streak bonus. If you want to be sneaky, you can start defusing the spike at the last second to force attackers back towards the bomb site and catching them up in the explosion. Does anyone have questions around that?
So I know in like a lot of like pro games recently, people have been dying to spike on purpose. If you're like leading enemies back to, like if you try to ninja defuse and lead them back to the bomb to die, like what is the benefit of that?
So if you can lure them back towards the site so that they get caught up in the bomb explosion, then they're losing that gun and the armor. So it's minus 4,300 for them. But that might not be as useful if they already have a ton of credits in their bank, right? And at that point, you just gave them a free ult orb too. So it's like a trade-off. So for instance, like a really good round where baiting them into the bomb would be really good is on a bonus, because the goal of a bonus is for you to be able to just get as many guns off the enemy's hands as possible. Getting them caught up in the spike explosion is a really great way to secure that. Because then on the third round, if every single person died on the other team because they died to spike explosion, they only have 3,000 credits to play the fourth round, while you guys have 4,900.
Wait, but I guess this is kind of like separate from the video, but like when these like dying to like purposely dying to the spike in their games, like what is the purpose of that?
It's to deny ult orbs from the enemy team. Because if you stay alive to the bomb explosion, like I said, you only get 1,000. So if your gun is worth less than 2,900 and you have armor left, then it makes sense for you to save to get the 1,000. But if your gun sucks, right, then why would you get 1,000 credits versus 2,900 if you're on a third round loss streak?
Yeah. So basically, they're trying to just kill themselves to spike rather than to enemies because it'll get them orbs. And they can get more money. Okay, gotcha.
Exactly. Because if they're about to win that round, then they're gonna have an econ advantage, right? So already, like, there's a good chance that they're already sort of in the lead. trade. And so even if you will get an ult orb by dying, they're also going to get an ult orb. And so they can snowball that a little bit harder with that lead too. Make sense?
Yeah, Dan, thank you.
With managing ult points, there's also a meta to it. So it's always important to identify the win condition for your team's composition. So let's say that your team lacks utility for retakes, like lack of drones, things like that. Instead, you have characters like Breach on your team. So definitely feed orbs and diffuses to agents like Breach, who can actually utilize his ult for the retake, versus Reyna, where it's kind of hit or miss because, yeah, her ult kind of sucks right now. If you struggle in post plans, for instance, give points to Sova or Brimstone so that they can get people off the bomb. And these are just some less impactful ults. You can prioritize Jet knives if you know you can get early knives. For instance, let's say Jet got like a 4k pistol round and then like another 2k on the second round. Give the orb to her so that the third round she has knives and she has a really good chance to get a couple guns off the enemy team. But it does sort of fall off later in the late game compared to other ults that have crowd control. With Raze ult, it's pretty expensive and it's kind of hit or miss with her ult right now. That's why you see it's like so many pro players just kind of using her ult more of like a zoning tool, almost like a KJ ult, but you're like walking around. I wouldn't really give it to her either unless like she's very close to her ult, or you have a set play in mind that you really want to make with the Raze ult. So for instance, if you have a Brim ult already up and let's say you have a Sova and a Raze on your team and you guys are playing bind, instead of giving it to the Sova necessarily, I'd probably give it more to the Raze, because let's say you guys are hitting A, you guys can combo the Raze ult with the Brim ult a lot better compared to the Sova ult. Because for instance, Brim can just ult U-Haul, that'll get people out of behind truck or in front of default, and that's like a free kill with the Raze ult. So those are just some little considerations to make, but yeah, these are just like a general guideline here. With the ult econ, it's really important for you to track the ults. So every single round, at the beginning of the round, I'm always holding tab and I'm always checking how many credits are available on my team and also the enemy team, and that also includes ults. So whatever ults are available, often telegraph which sides enemies will try to attack, and you'll start to recognize patterns around this too. So this is pattern recognition. For instance, if KJ has her ult on Haven and they're attacking, there's almost an 80% chance they're gonna end A, or they're gonna use that to fake C. On Fracture, you have a Killjoy, she has her ult, almost guarantee they're gonna try to go under all of B. So you guys should be fighting for that in the beginning of the round. And if you see that an enemy attacking teams, Phoenix is at, let's say 5 out of 6 ult points, you better know his team is going to fight for orb control. So you can read that and you can come up with the aggressive counterplay on CT side. The game, it's a lot about just assessing and predicting what enemies will try to do, preparing for that, and executing on it. And some updates as of today. So with pistol round, we're seeing agents like Killjoy buying sheriffs on attack pistol round when hitting sites with long range fights, because her turret got a lot of health still, even though they nerfed it. So it's still really strong on pistol round, and you can just sit back with her turret, just shoot pew pew with the sheriff. Frenzy and Shorty got nerfed, so I don't really see people using the Frenzy that often anymore, but the Shorty is still a really good secondary buy. So if you do have the extra credits to do it, especially if you're playing agents that can easily play around smokes, make sure to still buy Shorty. And when it comes to always buying light shield instead of full armor, so Fnatic really popularized this strat a couple months ago, especially during lock-in, and the difference of 600 credits is pretty massive, honestly, over multiple rounds. So this is something that you can consider, especially if you notice that the enemy team, they're buying Vandals a lot. Because if they're buying Vandals a lot, might as well just buy light shield instead of full shield, because for body shots is still required to kill someone with a light shield. The only time that I advise you not to do this is if you're playing against a team comp with a lot of poke, as in they have a lot of like shock darts, mollies, raise nades, things like that, where they can chunk you below 220, because then that becomes 3 body shots with the Vandal. Whereas if you had full shield and you got chunked like 18 damage or something, you're still 4 shots to the body. Do this if you really want to maximize the amount of credits you get in a game, but there's a trade-off to it still. So just keep in mind who you're playing against. And then lastly, there is a meta around just abusing 6-point ults, because most ultimates are really expensive now, 7 to 8 points. We have been seeing teams like C9 running Phoenix as win conditions on maps like Pearl, because both orbs on that map are relatively easy for attackers to farm. Okay, so that's just something to keep in mind and something you guys can play around with as well in your games. So now let's get into map control. First off, I'm going to break down macro positioning, and later on there's going to be micro positioning. And before we talk about what map control really is, you really need to understand how to utilize a minimap, because if you don't know how to utilize a minimap, this whole lesson is going to be useless for you. The minimap is so OP in this game. The fact that you can ping areas on the map, super broken to like spam the bomb, and the fact that the minimap also shows utility that's being thrown on the map from the enemies, all that gives so much information. So you need to understand how to utilize the minimap, and that comes with knowing first when to use the minimap. The best time to use the minimap is when the round's about to start. So you want to see where your teammates are positioned for both attacking and defending side, so that you can see if there's any gaps that you need to fill, or if you notice that teammates trying to make a play even though they're not saying anything, at least you know that they're playing up close, so you can try to play it off of them. Another time to use the minimap is when you see the kill feed pop up on the top right corner of your screen. That gives a lot of information as well, because you know exactly who died on your team or who died on the enemy team, and based on that you know what kind of gaps exist in the map that you guys might need to fill, or what gaps are coming out on the enemy team that you guys can actually capitalize on. When you're rotating or flanking, you also really need to utilize a minimap, because you're not in an immediate gunfight when you're rotating, unless you're rotating through a risky area where you know there was a gap. But if you know there wasn't a gap, you can rotate safely. Then you can just be looking at the minimap the whole time and see, do I commit to the full rotate? Do I fast rotate there? Or should I still anchor and just go back to site because the enemies aren't committing? When you're flanking as well, you need to utilize the minimap, because you need to know, hey, like, are my teammates actually committing on the other side of the map for me to be able to flank safely? Or do I need to hold off because my teammates aren't pushed out yet, or they haven't really made a lot of noise on the other side of the map? Every time comms are made and you aren't expecting an immediate gunfight, it's also a really great time to look at the minimap. So remember how we talked about peeker's advantage in the last lesson about like angle advantages? There's also this thing called peeker's advantage, where the person that is peeking generally has a slight advantage, because the person holding the person that's peeking has to react to the guy that's swinging out, and there's like a little bit of latency because of ping that allows the person peeking to see the person that is holding the peeker at a slightly faster time. Generally, when you're holding an angle, you never want to stand still unless you're playing an off angle. But if you're playing a common angle, you better be just jiggling back and forth, holding that angle, because you're going to get peeker's advantage. But because you're jiggling it, and even if someone does peek you, you can still be glancing at the minimap, because they're not going to be able to kill you right away because you were just jiggling it. That's when, like, aren't expecting an immediate gunfight, you can still be jiggling angles and still be glancing at the minimap to see what your teammates are doing, or what info your teammates are getting, or what the enemies are trying to do. And then I guess these two sort of go hand in hand, but when you're waiting for contact from your teammate or utility behind cover is also a pretty good time to use the minimap. Because let's say you're sitting in a smoke and you see your teammate's vision cone, and the moment that the enemy pops up on the vision cone and they're looking at your teammate, that's your timing to be able to like throw a flash out or peek out of the smoke and get the trade or get the kill, because now you guys have a crossfire. On the minimap, if you spot both the sentinel and the smoke, there's a really good chance it's a 5-man push. So if you push their flank to contain them through mid is ideal, or fast rotating if you're on the extremities on the other side of the map is ideal to help your teammates out. And if you only see one on the minimap and it's a sentinel or smokes, then it's most likely just a lurk and the real hit is on the other side of the map. And lastly, if you fought a guy on C and now he's spotted on A, the enemies are most likely going to hit the A site. This is just in ranked. These are just patterns that I've recognized over and over and over again. So this is something to keep in mind when you're deciding whether to rotate or flank. And timing utils or peaks. So using the information on the minimap, like your teammates' positions and sight lines, can help you decide where and when to use your utility or when to peek the enemy. And this becomes a lot more obvious when you're behind cover, sitting in smoke, and even just like jiggling behind cover, whatever, to just look at the minimap. So first, what is map control? Map control is all about vision. Vision that you and your teammates have with vision cones. And it's also vision and barriers that your util provides. So for instance, like Cypher Cam, recons, things like that. You and your teammates must rotate to establish as much map control for both attackers and defenders. Why is map control so important? The more map control that you and your team has, the more information you have on the enemy team, and therefore you'll be able to predict what the enemies will try to do and just come up with a better play. For instance, you can push out a B main CT side with a Sova dart, and this lets us know by a process of elimination, enemies have to be towards mid or A because you just cleared it. Or let's say you're defending or attacking, sorry. If you spot 3 people towards a site and you even saw a couple pieces of utility, you can even know based on footsteps what agent that is sometimes. Based on that information alone, you know what is the weak side and strong side of a map. So then you guys can just rotate and hit the weaker side and you'll have a much higher chance of winning the round. And again, why map control? Having all parts of the map covered on CT side lets your team avoid leaving gaps in your defense and getting pinched. You don't want to get pinched from attackers. Having more parts of the map covered on T side lets your team avoid getting flanked by defenders if a 4 to 5 man hit doesn't work out. Because a lot of times you guys try to do a 4 or 5 man hit, and if they have a sage slow, Raze nade, mollied, you guys can't do anything. And by the time you guys realize, oh shoot, we gotta leave, the whole enemy team knows that you guys were trying to do a 4 to 5 man hit, and so you guys have to spend all that time and utility re-clearing mid, re-clearing the other side of the map, and then maybe deciding, should we end on the site that we just try to hit, or do we rotate off? So let's talk about how do we actually control the map. You need to understand that there are 3 types of zones of control on the macro level. There are opening zones, there are intermediate zones, and there's a final zone. The opening zone is a space that's contested literally like when the spawn barrier drops at the start of the round. You'll see a lot of early opening plays that are fought around these opening zones, because depending on how the opening zone is played will determine how much map control each team has over the intermediate zones, or the neutral zones as other people like to call it. So this is the space between the opening zone and the final zone, which is a site. And within the bomb site, there are also a front site, a mid site, and a back site. So these are zones of control that you need to understand if you want to look at the game analytically. So there are phases of the round where these zones of the map are being fought over. Phase 0, this is the planning stage. This is before the round actually starts. For attackers, you guys need to decide, are we going to do a split push, a 5-man push, a 4-0-1 setup, which is where you have like 4 people on one side, 0 person's watching mid, and like 1 on the other side of the map to holding the flank, or are you going to do a fake? And this is also where you need to predict the defender setup to know what agents are playing on which side of the map. Based on that, is it going to be easier to hit A or B? Should we throw a fake so that we can bait out some important utility that's been really giving us trouble for defenders? You also need to decide based on how the enemy has been playing, or based on, let's say, like the ultimates available, you need to decide, am I going to play for stall? Am I going to try to isolate duelists by delaying some mollies or utility? Are we going to delay the plant, or are we going to retake right away when they tap the bomb to explode out onto site? There's so many options for defenders as well. With phase 1, this is where you are fighting for the opening zones and gathering info around the whole map. This is why it's really, really important for you to understand why certain parts of the map are more important to contest than others. And this is why we have all the map classes. And in phase 1, this is also where defaults can happen. So with defaults, it's all about getting info first. The goal of a default is to gain info, then it's to bait out important utility that can obliterate your team's push. And the third goal is just to get picks. This is not your primary goal. People say, oh, let's just default and get picks. That's not the main reason why you default. It's all about info first, because you need to understand how defenders are set up, what utility they have, what utility your team has been having trouble dealing with, and how can we bait that out early on. And in case the enemy team decides to get a little antsy and they want to push out for info, because you guys are just holding each choke at the start of the round, that's when you guys can maybe try to get picks, because they push out and they get a little over aggressive and they get greedy. But always it's about info first. And then you get into phase 2, which is making decisions around the gathered information from phase 1. And for attackers, you need to decide, okay, what's the weak side and strong side of the map? Which utility is up on our team and also the enemy team, and what's also down for our team and the enemy team. When it comes to weak side and strong side, on a map like Ascent, you'll generally have a 2-1-2 setup for defenders. So 2 people towards B, 1 person watching mid, and 2 people on A. But what people can also do, let's say you have sentinel utility, such as a Cypher Trip or a Killjoy alarm bot that's holding mid. Then you can have 2 people towards B. You have 0 people watching mid, but because they have the sentinel utility, as long as this doesn't activate, they still have control over this area. But as soon as this is broken, then they lose control over all mid. But the advantage to that is they can now have 3 people towards A. So let's say that the enemy team has been going A a lot, then you can just put a trip mid and then have 3 people stacked towards A, and generally that'll favor the defenders on that site. With defenders, you need to think about which side of the map did we notice activity. Remember when I was talking about the mini map and how if you spot, let's say, a sentinel and a controller together, that's activity that you notice that is a really strong indicator of where they're going to end. So that will help you determine, should I early rotate? Should I anchor the site? Should I push out to try to pinch the attackers on the other side of the map? There's a lot of things you can do. So let's talk about defaults a little bit more in depth. So I went over the 3 reasons of why we default, but I also want to talk about how defaults can help you counter these different types of plays. So for instance, if the defenders are playing really aggressive, Omen blinding at the start of the round, just dashing on you, or they're nading a choke really early on and they're taking space, then defaulting just lets you bait out that utility. And that means you guys still hold on to utility to be able to take that space back, and the enemy team won't be able to have utility to stop you guys from doing that. This is pretty useful for playing against aggressive defenders. It's also useful to avoid stacked sites on eco rounds. So let's say you check the economy and you notice, okay, we have a lot of money, but the enemy team, they're broke. So we know that they're on a eco round. There's a really good chance that they might try to do something really cheesy, set up a trap with worse guns, and they might even have 4 people stacked on a site. So to avoid that, if you default, you can at least get info slowly around the map. And this is where initiators come in. Your job is to just paint a picture on the map of what's happening. And so defaults can help you avoid just running into a stacked site and getting picks little by little with better guns. And also defaults are really good if you had a failed 5-man push because there was a bunch of utility that was dumped on you. So again, that's just baiting out utility and making it easier for you guys to attack. It does require patience, but it can pay off big time. So for instance, if the enemy team has a brimstone, his smokes are not rechargeable. So if he's smoking off a choke right at the start of round, as soon as you guys make some noise, that's really good because that smoke isn't going to come back anymore. And you guys can make more noise around the map and apply pressure all around the map. And now the brimstone will get stuck about thinking, oh shoot, like where should I actually smoke off? Where is that going to be useful? With default setups for attackers, a 1-0-4 setup is great as a precautionary step to prevent enemies from flanking you, or at least it'll notify if they are flanking. A 1-3-1 setup is great if you're trying to split push towards any site. And then a 2-1-2 setup gives you the most amount of info and it's the safest against aggressive plays, okay? Because now you're paired up in the extremities. A 1-3-1 setup, not so strong against aggressive plays because if they push you with 2 or even 3 people and you're just alone, you're kind of screwed. And for some common mistakes to go through, if you prioritize picks and you die alone, that is terrible for your team because the whole goal of defaulting was for you to be able to get info. But because you died, now your team loses out on your utility and also all that space because now they don't know, oh shoot, like the defenders got 1 kill on an attacker. If they don't see anyone else there, they might even get greedy and try to push out and pinch you guys on the other side of the map. Please, if you're going for picks, if that's your actual goal, then do a 2-1-2 setup. Another common mistake that I see for attackers is when they're defaulting, their stage 0 where they plan is good. Their stage 1 where they're fighting for the opening zones is also fine. But what happens is when they get to stage 2, you guys kind of get stuck. Like, oh shoot, we're kind of spread all across the map. How do we group up and actually hit a site together? Who's going to make the decision of where to go? You need to identify weak side and the strong side that I went over for defenders, and you need to call your teammate to rotate over to you. Someone needs to take the initiative or else you'll never get into stage 2 and you'll actually eventually just run out of time and just get stomped. Now, going over defender setups, there are a couple things you can do. As a defender, you can either push the zone, you can either hold the zone, or you can yield the zone. The zones as in the zones of control here. So when you push out as a defender, it's a very high risk but high reward play that you can make. And this is really good as a counter to stacked executes. So like a 4 or 5-man push. So for instance, if it's like a 1-1-3 setup or 1-3-1 setup, like the split push, if you manage to push out towards the side where it's a 1 setup as like 2, and you get the kill, again, you take so much space. Or like I said, with the Sova dart, it clears out everything. You push out, you get so much info. Again, by process of elimination, you have all the info in the world to make the best play for your team. Weak side plays retake or yield the zone in case attackers don't push stack site. Yeah, so this is really good too because let's say that you were doing a 2-0-3 setup on mid. If there's a lot of noise towards B, your teammates are saying, hey, like they're actually coming towards B, then you guys can actually decide to push out of mid, see if there's anyone tiles, and if there isn't, you guys can push out and contain them here. Or maybe you guys did an aggressive play out here and there was no one spotted, then by process of elimination, they have to be towards mid or tiles, and that means you guys can just fast flank them and contain them again here instead of just sitting around A again. And then if enemies are not there, yeah, flank us too, leave it there to watch a mid push or lurk. So what I mean by that, so you have 3 people towards A, like maybe Omen, there was a blind A main, and 2 of you guys run out and fight this A main area. There's no one there. Then Omen can go back mid, just make sure they're not walking up mid like this on you guys or going cat. And then these 2 can come all the way around, and now you guys have a crossfire towards tiles. And then for holding the zones, so most common setup for defenders is a 2-1-2 setup to cover all chokes of the map that enemies can enter through. You get the most amount of info, and this is the safest setup against aggressive plays. And again, I went over the 3-0-2 setup. And lastly, you can yield the zone. This is the goal as a defender. This is when you're playing on site, not when you're pushing out or holding. As a defender, either your goal should be to kill 2 and die, so your team is up in numbers. You either kill 1 and play retake. Let's say I'm playing Reyna or Jet. If I can kill 1 playing an off angle and I get out and play with my team, 5v4, we should be able to come out in numbers if we just trade each other properly. And lastly, let's say you were trying to play an off angle to try to kill 1 and play retake, but they dump a ton of utility in the opening zones, so you can't really do much. Then just run away. You can play retake, but it's even better if you just try to stay alive as long as possible backside. So game sense really is just so that your teammates can actually have time to rotate over to you. And so while the enemies are focused on fighting you, your teammates come out and shoot them in the back. Either of these 3 is really good. And so generally you want to contest the opening zones to condition attackers into committing utility. This is very, very, very important that a lot of players, even in Immortal that I've seen, even like low radiant, like don't understand. Like I just don't understand this. So let's say I'm playing Jet here. A lot of times people are like, Jet, stop peeking a main and just dying, okay? So obviously if you're playing Jet and you're playing on CT side and you're dying like this every round, you are trolling. But it is very important for you to condition enemy team into knowing that you will fight for these opening zones, here. Because if you don't condition them, then they're just gonna use 0 utility to actually clear all this space here in the intermediate zones. And they're gonna have all their utility available to dump onto the site or using it for the retake or the post plant. So that's why if I'm always applying pressure as Jet, okay, I'm going to peek here this round, I'm going to peek here this round, I'm going to peek this angle with an op, I'm going to peek this angle, I'm going to peek here. If I'm all over in their head about where I'm going to be, they're going to be forced to use utility at the start, whether it's a drone, whether it's a dog, whether it's a pop flash, whether it's a knife. Like they're gonna have to burn utility at the start to get control over this opening and intermediate zone before they can even get onto the site. And this makes it a lot easier during the retake because they have to wait for cooldowns or they don't have that utility at all. You want to contest for those spaces. Now, before I get into micro positioning, I'm just going to show you everything as a playbook. So this was when Chamber was a little more meta. Okay, so this is a 1-1-3 setup. So this would be like a fake where you guys make a bunch of noise over on A and you guys have control over B main and mid here. So Omen, he doesn't even need to aggressively peek here or try to get info about someone playing market or a cat. All he's doing is just making sure no one pushes out here to try to like fast flank you guys. He's just containing this area. And we're droning, making footsteps. Defenders are probably like, oh shoot, they're going A. Omen can just throw a smoke real quick for door. The enemy, most of you guys off. You guys commit the second smoke. And this is where the chamber has the opportunity to start looking up. If you guys have conditioned the enemy team into thinking that you guys are doing a 4 to 5 man push each time, there's a really good chance that they'll try to like just rotate off early. And the reason why I had this chamber here at the start is because let's say that the enemy team does like a recon right here. Doesn't scan anyone, so he's just hiding from it. So if they decide to push up, let's say the enemy Reyna like decides to push up off of that, he hits a trip, he peeks off the trip and gets a kill. But here, this is his timing because now the defenders heard that they're going A, so they're rotating off. They even commit a dart, but they don't go out yet. It's scary. Chamber goes up. And at this point, there's a good chance because you guys canceled the push or you guys aren't coming out that the guy that was going CT is probably just coming back now. So this is where Chamber's already out on site. And notice how Omen's still just holding this in case people aren't going like this. So Chamber's already up. And all he has to do really, instead of pushing up all the way here too, he can just sit here and just hold this line of sight and just preventing enemies from coming back onto site. And he has his TP set up here too. He can even close the door. So he doesn't have to worry about this angle and this angle at the same time. And now these guys are all rotating. You guys smoke off cat, so you don't have to worry about a guy swinging out of cat because maybe they were looking here. They came back. You don't want to get shot here, right? As you're rotating off. Rotate, and that's pretty much it. Let's look at a split push here. Look at the amount of map control that your teammates have. By having a trip here, as long as no one pushes out A main, hits his trip, you guys have control over this line right here. And this was also when Chamber had the TP, so don't worry about that too much. So at the start of the round, Reyna, she does jiggle for this common angle, but she's not going to really push out that much because she's all alone. She's just making sure people don't like push out and fight her. So she's just holding this zone right here. We dart. Get info, we smoke tiles because if you're scaling up mid like this, it's really scary to scale up by exposing yourself to all these angles at the same time. So you get the smoke down, your chamber can play off this trip or he can just make sure that no crazy person swings out of this smoke while your teammates are scaling up mid. You go up, you do a deep smoke for top mid now. Again, chamber just holding, and he used to be able to do this TP where he can TP from this top mid area to tiles. So he can just rotate back towards B should you guys end B. Now Sova drones up Jet. She gets in. We do an Omen blind to see if anyone's holding market. Jet goes in. And this is where Reyna moves up. The whole time, Reyna was just chilling because her teammates are not ready to get onto the site yet. So timing matters a lot when you're sort of by yourself or on the other side of the map. Same thing on a split push with Cat. Like, you never want to start going out yet here until your teammates have probably made it out here. Because the best split pushes happen when you're applying pressure from multiple angles at the same time. So if I push out way too early by myself and I die before my teammates are out, that's not applying pressure at all. These guys aren't worried yet. But if I start moving up right here, when my teammates blinded and they're taking market, then there's going to be a guy probably holding this. They're just holding this market angle. So then if you peek out, you can definitely get the trade at least, or pinch them. And then you Reyna blind to get out, jet smoke for CT. Notice how Sova is now lurking pizza, so that if they're going to try going towards market to kill these guys in the back, this guy's holding their backs. And Chamber too, he's still holding the rotate from A, so he can kill them if he needs to. And then by the time like your teammates are pretty much secured site, notice how they're splitting up, pinching both sides. And he can go group up with his team and play B main. And then the post plant, you can have crossfires going on like this. And this is a very powerful post plant setup. Then let's go over a 5-man retake. So this is a 5-man push. You guys have a trip for flank. This is when Chamber again was able to TP across the map. It was super broken. But again, like Sentinel utility mid. So even if he TPs off, it's a 2-0-3 setup and he can help on site really well. So we throw a drone to clear off this jet. She backs off because of the drone. And notice how we dart outside B. It doesn't spot anyone. The Reyna also pushes out to capitalize on the info that this dart is getting. And so because Reyna pushed out, she doesn't see anyone. The dart doesn't see anyone. Sova can just early rotate because they know, okay, they're either mid or they're A. And by the time they drone and they're making footsteps, they probably know that it's an A hit. So this guy's already out. Chamber already TPs. Sova's already rotating off. And this guy repositioned himself. So this is where micro positioning comes into play. Generally, when you're collapsing onto a site for both attackers and defenders, you want to pinch the site. As the first entry, sometimes it's jet. I might dash onto switch, wait a little bit until my second entry can go out, and then I'll wrap around stairs and pinch the site like this. So during a retake as well, it's best if you come out of market, come out of CT, and if you can even flank, and coming out of B main is very, very strong. So in the same way, in this example, we're going to have two people paired up door, and this guy's going heaven, so he can pair up with Sova for the retake. Right now, he just left because they're using a lot of utility to flush him off. So we get a dart. At the same time, we Omen blind to clear Gen, just smokes and dashes, Reyna flashes. So timing during executes is really important too, because if you're trying to shoot the dart, you're trying to break the eye at the same time, you're going to get scanned or hit by one or the other. So timing is very important. And so at this point, they're already ready. We're already out. Again, when we're attacking, right side, left side, we're pinching. And here, let's say that they get the bomb down. While the person's planting is also not a bad time to actually just start the retake right away, because the person planting the bomb, they're not going to have their gun out. So it's actually a 4v5, maybe even a 3v4, because one person was planting the bomb. So we get the Omen blind through door. It hits one guy, and off of the blind too, these guys swing out of the smoke. We kill the jet together. Maybe the Reyna or Sova kills jet somehow. We get the trade. Omen's like repositioning himself after he plants the spike. And then maybe he managed to get one, but they just get pinched. And so notice how here too, this Reyna tried to flank, but the trip gets spotted. So Chamber goes back. He gets the kill. If this guy dies too, then pretty much the retake's successful, because now there's so many areas you guys are coming out from. But let's just say in this example, she dies. So now it's just Chamber by himself. And so at this point, he has no option but to try to push out of the smoke and kill the guy that's defusing the bomb. I guess he can spam through it, but he can get spammed back. So that's actually why right now we just smoked off A main, because we don't want to deal with that when we're also coming out of heaven and door. We just want to focus on the site first. But if this smoke fades, definitely smoke the bomb off so that this guy has to peek out and shoot the bomb while these guys can reposition themselves and shoot the guy that's spamming the bomb. This is a 104 default. This is essentially a fake where you're canceling a push. You have utility watching mid, getting some mid control. You're applying pressure over on A with the smoke to deny information that you're going to cross over to short. Now they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lanes to worry about. But if you don't fight for this A main space, then they don't have to worry about this lane at all. And so you guys might commit smokes here. You guys are droning up. This is pretty much a fake at this point, but you notice, oh shoot, there's a lot of defenders rotating through a link. Maybe we need to cancel. This is where Reyna can also start pushing up, because you guys have already made a bunch of noise stomping all over A. Notice how now too, Killjoy is just getting more mid control. She can go with the team as well. I guess this alarm bot's kind of useless if she's standing in front. And then now notice how, because Reyna's already pushed up, these guys can just run back to her. And KJ is now going mid to cut off the rotation from defenders that have rotated towards A, and they're trying to come back towards C because you guys canceled this space. So that's why Haven is a pretty attacker-sided map, but that's the general idea. As a lurker, you have the option to actually go through mid and cut off rotations. And here, this guy goes all the way into spawn to kill the guys that are rotating this way, catch them off guard, or catch them off guard this way. We're trying to go here. We have all of sight. Killjoy's getting the rotator. So that's kind of how that setup looks like. So what if you guys actually successfully managed to take site? What should Killjoy be doing? So instead of flanking all the way through their spawn like this, which takes forever, and you might be way too late. Like your teammates might already be dead because they planted the bomb so long ago and they already started the retake without you. So instead, have this turret still watching the B main push, but you can go tiles. And so you can either go walk up into mid and kill these guys that are rotating this way. You can also come cat. And if attackers are trying to go through tree and garden, retake from door, you have this insane off angle. And so they have to clear you here. And that applies a lot of pressure too, and eliminates this choke that defenders will be able to retake from. So even just positioning yourself here, just jiggling this, just being annoying, like even running away, you can wrap around. Or same thing, like you guys plant the bomb, you can throw mollies, okay? And as long as your teammates like are holding the site pretty well, you can just do a late rep all the way and then fight from door as well. There's a lot of options you have as a lurker.
Thank you for watching to the end of part 1 of the Game Sense lesson. Part 2 will come out when we hit 100k subscribers on YouTube, so make sure you're subbed. Thanks for watching.